Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Code with the Italians. Today we have our friend Zach that is back with us, and we are doing. I'm very excited because this is a this is a text stream, and that makes me very excited by default. I'm sorry, Ivan. I know, but still.
No. I'm excited for you as well. Don't worry. Just go with it.
But today is a somewhat special stream because we also have another friend of ours, fellow Googler, that is going to be lurking in the chat and probably collecting feedback about what Zach will be showing and asking questions in a very informal way. So don't worry, nothing too serious there. But please do answer the questions that are asked if you can. Because that's also a very interesting point to bring back for Zach and Chica so that they can improve their work even further. And then we all get to benefit from that. Zach, what are we talking about today? What is the new shiny stuff?
It's very new. Unfortunately, not very shiny just yet, but we've been working for most of this year on a kind of a big project, a little bit intimidating project, to rewrite the TextField APIs in Compose.
Just a small thing, right?
It's just text input.
This thing is the exact same thing. I mean, that's an easy day.
Yeah.
Easy day.
It's text is famously very simple.
Yeah, it's what, 2 points on the Scrum scale or something?
Oh yeah. Small t-shirt size for sure.
Now there is localization and analytics, so let's make it a 3.
Oh, there we go. We gotta log the keystrokes. That was a joke.
Just in case.
I feel like I should just say that.
Yeah, there is a bad time to do this. It's bad because people are clipping everything nowadays. So
exactly,
out of context, Zach. And I already see the hashtag.
Oh god, looking forward to that supercut. Yeah, we do have. Although speaking of watching keystrokes, that's part of the API we're rethinking. We're really kind of rethinking the whole thing. So it's really fun. There's a ton of API surface. It's really challenging, and it's been really cool trying to figure out what we actually need to do. And Chica's been helping us with that. And we actually just finished up a user study with some of the very early draft APIs for this. That just kind of like exploring kind of basic foundational changes. And so yeah, we've been working really closely with her for the last couple months. And yeah, it's really cool.
Okay, so I know you're going to show us something today, and I'm very excited about that. I think we need to do the even thing before we get into the the core of the topic.
Yes, the event thing today is also fighting lighting. Lights,
I can see.
Lights.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ! You probably know this purple.
Ooh, purple.
Like
it looks blue.
Blue kind of. Yeah, it's a kind of blue purple-ish. It was in Francesca's room, and now apparently is in my in my home office because she needed the red one. So yeah, that's if you want to have a very interesting life, relocate and renovate a house.
I can see that your internet connection is still being very, very struggling. So you have to know that Ivan's connection doesn't really play well with bad weather, and I think it's raining. So
yes, can you hear me better?
Oh, now you're better. Yay!
Yeah.
Now we can see the blurple better.
Yeah, well, come on. So anyway, Events Moment is all about thanking people that support the stream. You can support us in a plethora of ways on YouTube, liking and subscribing, and watching ads. But but that's it.
A plethora, 2 ways.
No. You can also buy our merch. You can buy the t-shirt if you like. You can buy the stickers, and you can also just subscribe to our Twitch channel for free if you have an Amazon Prime subscription, because if you connect it to your Amazon gaming account, you can basically subscribe for free every month one channel, and you can pick us. And what else? I think we are done. So it was a quick
The
one.
only thing was you were supposed to say all of that in Spanish.
Oh, where? Sorry. Oh, gracias. Gracias, Mark. Puede ayudar el stream comprando los stickers. Los stickers italianos. Ok. Bueno.
And that's done.
En la camiseta, yeah, whatever. Just thank you. Gracias a todos los soportes. And we can go.
Yeah.
We can go.
Cool. So, Zach, first of all, let me know whenever you want to share your screen with the audience, because they're not seeing it right now. But maybe a bit of introduction. I think it would be cool to start by mentioning why this is happening.
Yeah, totally.
Step 0.
Yeah, and I finally took your advice and did minimal preparation for this. So I really have no idea what we're gonna do.
Preparation is for the prepared, which we are not.
Just wing it. I mean, look at my t-shirt. Do you really? I mean, do you really? I mean, how is the quote? Do I look like a man with a plan? Right, from the Batman. Yes, we don't do that.
Perfect. Yeah. So, for some context, there's there's a few problems with the current TextField API. There's a lot of open bug reports, a lot of open feature requests. It kind of works for some basic cases. Is basically kind of how I see it. And I'm always, working on it. You see all the bug reports and everything, and you're like, there's so much going on. I'm surprised anyone uses this at all. But it does work for some basic use cases, and we've spent some time on it and stuff. And we're basically spend us on the Compose text team. We spend a lot of time, fixing bugs with this thing, and we got to the point where we were like, there's really some like fundamental things about the design and the implementation that we really need to improve. Kind of some tech debt and just some design stuff that we need to fix in order to actually work on this, because it was just taking forever to fix bugs, and some of the bugs are really complicated, and you fix one thing and another thing breaks. And so we're like, we really need to like set aside a chunk of time and rethink the API now that we kind of know, some. When TextField was initially written, it was like pretty early on, and some of the Compose idioms hadn't quite been established yet. So now that kind of things have settled down a little bit, we can see what worked and didn't work in other APIs, and that we also we have a better, I think, understanding of some parts of the problem. I joined the Compose team only a year and a half ago, basically, and hadn't really worked with. I'd worked with edit text before, but like I hadn't actually worked on edit text.
Yes.
Small
difference.
Yeah. I think the former is a claim that most Android devs, if not all Android devs, will be able to make. The latter, not as many.
There's I don't know. There's probably like a handful of people who actually like maybe have internalized how all this stuff actually fits together, if that. But a lot of like me and Halil, who's been on the stream a couple of times, we both joined from working on apps and stuff, and hadn't, I don't think, done a ton of work on the actual thing. So we're kind of like learning a lot of this stuff as we join the team and figuring out what the problems are. And fixing bugs is a great way to do that. And we were like, okay, like definitely some things need to change, and we need to, but it's going to be a big project. This is obviously a huge, maybe it's not obvious, but it is a quite large API surface, and the number of use cases that a text field has to support is enormous. And we have one text field, and it has to work for like every use case, like in almost every app. Like the number of people, like you said, who've probably written their own edit text view for something is probably, I'm guessing, quite small, and like it's a ton of work. So it was going to be a big project, but we had somewhere to start from, and luckily we know people internally who've worked on some of this stuff before, so we have some place to start. And yeah, so this year we started, like, actually last year we really started this, and we kind of sat down and looked at everything that all the requirements we needed for the text field, and tried to, like, categorize them a bit into different types of use cases and prioritize and stuff like that. And then this year we sat down and started writing a design doc, and just kind of brainstorming what changes, what would be more usable from a user perspective. And so part of this project is eventually we're going to, like, update some of the internals. But the main thing is that, like, there are certain ways that the API was designed that make certain bugs, like, very hard to fix, if not impossible to fix, or it's very easy to do things that are, like, very wrong, I guess. And
an example
more
would be what?
Yeah, so if you've watched any of the talks from Sean or Alejandra about TextField State, you've probably seen this, but, like, it's really easy, for example, so just the current TextField API, if you haven't used it before, you pass in a string and a callback for when the string changes. So I can show you that here. So it looks, lots of docs. It looks like this. The important parts here are you pass in value, and you get a callback when the value changes. And the idea is that you store this in a state somewhere, and when the text changes, someone hits a key or you use voice typing, we fire this callback, you update your state, and then on the next frame, you recompose and get the new text value. So it's conceptually pretty simple, I think, and I think that, like, I think there's been, like, feedback that it's, like, fairly easy to understand, like, how this works. But it's also really easy to do, get really creative with this and do things like when you get like, store this the text value in a mutable state flow, for example, instead of a mutable state, and then have some sort of pipeline where you're collecting the flow and doing some async stuff, or maybe not even doing really any async stuff, but just based on the way flow works, introducing little bits of asynchrony, and then you end up triggering the recomposition, like a frame too late or something like that. When you do that, everything gets out of whack, and you start to see really weird stuff with text input. There's other things here too, like one thing that's always kind of bugged me is that we have this single line parameter, and which does a lot of things, actually, but then we also have these min and max lines, which are ignored if single line is true, because obviously if single line, by definition, max lines is 1, min lines is 1. So, but you could pass single line is true and then set min lines to 5 and max lines to 10 or something like that. So, like, that's kind of a nonsense, like, input. We ignore it. It works, but, like, it's not clear what that means, and it's not also entirely clear, like, maybe what single line all does. So, like, single line, if you have a single line text field, it changes the wrapping behavior, it changes the scrolling behavior, it changes how it handles, like, input, like, for new line keys and stuff like that. So this is actually, like, a pretty complicated little set of parameters. And visual transformation has been a huge source, maybe one of the biggest source of crashes with TextField, because this API is pretty powerful. Basically, visual transformation lets you specify a function that takes in some text and returns changed text. which isn't just text. So you can replace characters in the text. In the password case, for example, you can replace every character with like a dot. But you can also add text and remove text. And because you can change the length of the string, you also have to pass this function that defines how to map the offset from the source string to the transformed string and back. And this interface is really hard to implement correctly. So this is a very like complex thing to use. Like it's conceptually, there's not too many things going on. You return a string and an offset mapping, but it's really hard to do right for a lot of common use cases. And if you do it wrong, you get a crash or weird stuff that starts to happen. And it's also not, it's possible to write a transformation that is actually not valid and that we can't handle. And so it doesn't actually give us enough information in the text field all the time to do what we need to do. So it's really easy to use incorrectly, and it doesn't actually like solve all of the problem that it was intended to solve. So this is kind of a this has been a major pain point, this visual transformation, and so we were like, we've got to rethink that and do it better.
It feels like it can get very messy very quickly, even if you start from a, like a good heart place. Like, it made sense.
The intentions were good.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
The naive thing that I'm right now, when you mentioned the single line, max line, min line, I was like, okay, but so single line is basically max line equal 1. So do you need it? And then the thing that you said, there is a bit of reasoning behind. I was like, it cannot be that naive, right? If it's there, right? I mean, if it's there at some point, that was necessary. But now it's very hard to actually constrain, right? So you can create impossible states. Like,
Yes.
I want a single line, but also max line 7. And then you're like,
Yep.
now what? And now you need to do like internal machinery. So yeah, ABIs are hard.
Yeah, they so are. And another thing about this is it's not clear what min and max lines actually means, just based and I think it's documented here. Yeah, but this is actually, so it is documented, but this could mean two things, right? Like, so max lines could be like, we stop letting you enter new lines after a certain number. And so that's the max number of new lines that can be in the text, basically. That there's no built-in way to do that in the API. I don't think there's a way to do that in the current edit text API, but I'm not 100% sure. You could do it with a filter or whatever the edit text versions of that are. But it's actually a measurement constraint. So this is really only a layout parameter, and well, it's mostly a layout parameter. It also though affects single line text fields will scroll horizontally if they overflow, and they'll never wrap because it's single line. They scroll horizontally instead. And with edit text,
I imagine the UX beautiful. Like,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, I think right now the current text field, you can actually put new lines in a single line text field, but it's impossible to because they only scroll horizontally. If you have multiple lines in the text, they'll be hidden below the text field and you can't scroll to them. So because we're missing the current implementation, I believe, I'm not sure if this has been fixed, but the current implementation doesn't actually handle new lines in the text. So what edit text does in that case is it like ignores the new lines. Basically, it replaces the new line characters with like just kind of spaces, or like zero width characters, actually not spaces, zero width, just some Unicode that's like a zero width space. So it basically joins all the lines. And the idea is that, well, you probably shouldn't, you probably never would have new lines in a single line text field. It also like prevents you from like, I think it ignores when you hit like the enter key or whatever. It doesn't add new lines to the string. So there's that, and then so there's the wrapping, there's like the scrolling, and there's the layout. And if you have single line false, you can still have a text field that's one line and won't grow more than that. But now it'll wrap vertically, and then it'll scroll vertically, and you can enter new lines and you can show them and stuff like that. So there's like a lot going on there.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah. So yeah, it's real fun. Another thing here is that the decoration box is the last parameter on basic text field, which this is a function. If you haven't used text field, decoration box is basically a wrapper composable that you can optionally provide to add like various like decorations in Chrome around your text box. So material. So if you've done material with Compose, you've probably used the TextField API, and this basic text field might actually be kind of foreign, but so TextField, this is the material version of it, and it actually uses basic text field internally. I hope also this is big enough. If people can't see this in the chat,
you can zoom in a bit, maybe, just because I know someone is going to ask at some point. Perfect.
Is that working?
Yeah, around 20 to 22 is generally okay.
Okay. Well, I don't think I need that. I can probably just...
You would be surprised how many people watch our stream on a phone.
Oh, no. I've done it myself many times.
So you wouldn't?
Actually, let me just get into presentation mode here. That's going to be easier. Oh, now it goes full screen. Great. Okay, anyway, so yeah, so this is the text field, and it uses basic text field internally, and it uses a decoration box to, well, it's factored into a separate composable here, but the decorate, it's a big tooltip.
We don't see it, don't worry.
The material decoration box adds like the label and the border and all that stuff, and like outlined versus whatever the other ones are, the underline. So it's a powerful API, but because it's the last parameter in the API, it will autocomplete, because Compose, it will autocomplete by like adding an empty lambda after the text field. So you type basic text, you hit enter, or whatever the keyboard shortcut is, and you get a function call with like no parameters and just like an open block afterwards, like an open lambda. And you're like, okay, cool. Like, what do I put in here? And it's very confusing. So that can, that's another thing. It's just like there's a whole bunch of stuff here, and that's just off the top of my head. And there's probably things I'm missing. But yeah, so these are some of the API things where we're like, it's usable, but like it's hard to use correctly. It's really easy to use wrong. And some of these things we can't, it's hard to enforce, like making sure you're storing the state the right way. It's very easy to do that wrong. A lot of people want to, their instinct is to like, well, I'm using mutable stateflow everywhere else, so I want to use that for my TextField state too. And like it makes it tricky. And there's even parts about that state management that don't even, that are just like, have caused bugs, even if you are using it correctly, because there's like a lot of interactions that can affect the cursor position, for example, or the selection position. And those will happen from keyboard events or IME events or touch events. And when that happens, we have to update our internal state to show where the cursor is and all that stuff. And there's a lot of different things that can go on there when you like touch a field, focus it for the first time. Wherever you place the cursor, depends on where you touch. Well, ideally it would. And so there's all these things that can go into that state. And if you're using the string version, we kind of track that internally. But there's also an overload of basic text field in here that uses a text field value. If you haven't used this before, it is a string, actually, it's an annotated string that also stores selection and something called composition, which confusingly has nothing to do with Compose composition.
Naming is hard.
There's also, but there's also really no reason to expose the actual composition range in the API. So when you're editing text, getting a bit into the weeds here, but when you're editing text, composition is like the underline under the word when you're typing or something like that. So if you've only used like I guess like Latin characters or like languages when you're typing, it'll just look like the autocomplete basically region. So it's like the word that'll get auto-completed if you hit a suggestion. But it's a critical part, fundamental part of text input for like a lot of CJK languages, where you actually need that composition to, you're typing in one character set maybe, and it's rendering a different one, and you need to be able to like edit part of the string as you're typing, and that applies that on both mobile phones and desktop. But that's kind of an implementation detail, and like if this doesn't make sense to you, it's probably good, because most of the time you shouldn't have to know this is a thing. Like it doesn't really need to be in the public API, but it is state that we need to track. So so, and then there's selection, which is something you probably have used before. At least this also represents cursor position. So if you pass one of these in, then it's kind of up to you to store and track the cursor position. So if you type something, the cursor moves, we give you a new value of this with the updated cursor position. You have to send that back to us, or the cursor will move. But if there's a whole bunch of changes that happen in the same frame to the text field state, we won't get the new value from you until the next frame. So we can do a whole bunch of updates and not see the thing right away. And so when we get it, it might be like we have to always kind of every frame we have to like synchronize all of our internal state changes with the state change that you're giving us. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but I remember seeing a bug where like it was just like we kind of have to guess, because we can't actually we now have two sources of truth. The one you're passing in, which is really the real source of truth, and then we have the one that we also have a copy of it internally that we can update and then see immediately, so that we can actually like do various calculations correctly. So it's like kind of tricky to manage, and then there's this composition thing that doesn't really need to be in there. So anyway, a lot of the API problems. That's kind of the reason we started to think about rethinking the API. I guess that was a lot of talking, I guess.
It's okay. I have a question from the chat that I'm going to ask you. I don't know if you know the answer to it, but let's see. Does the focus manager take the decoration box into consideration when focusing on a text field? For example, in a scrolling list, will it auto scroll to the text field including the decoration box, or without counting it?
It should. The focus, all of the focus modifiers, like the thing that the focusable modifier is applied to is the outer basic text field, including the decoration box and everything. So basically, the way like there's kind of like, and we have modifiers we apply to the internal text field as well. So like the way the decoration box works is it's a wrapper function. It gets another function, another composable that it is supposed to call, that will be the actual inner text field thing where the actual text is drawn, and the cursor and all that stuff. So like material, for example, adds some padding, and then it adds a border and maybe the label thing and like whatever. So it's actually bigger than the internal area. And then the outside part, all of the like that's where the focusable modifier goes. The semantics around that, kind of the things that are kind of like apply to the overall text box. And then on the inner area where the actual text is rendered, we do things like the draw modifier and stuff. So we actually have the modifier that handles pointer input is also on the outer part, because if you tap in the padding of a text field, it should still focus the text field, and it'll calculate the cursor position based on that pointer event, even though it's not in the actual text drawn area. So like there's two kind of sets of modifiers there, and the whole text box is the thing that's focusable. So when you in a scrolling list, for example, that's the bounds that are seen as the whole text field.
You just reminded me I need to fix exactly that thing in StudioBox.
Oops.
No. It's a thing I knew, but I just didn't have time to do it for the previous scanneries, because it's a lower priority thing. It still works. By the way,
for text field or?
No. It's not compose, so it's swing, which makes
yes.
everything more complicated.
And also lower priority.
And also lower priority. Yesterday I fixed a bug where the text field doesn't change size as you add text to it, because apparently you need to force swing to do a relayout. It doesn't pick up that the text should change the size of the component.
I mean,
the logic was
you
there.
know how this new technologies are.
Yeah.
I mean, swing around for like 20 million years and things like that. They never used it, right?
But the thing is,
it's a very niche use case.
Yeah.
Size of the text. I mean, what are you doing? Crazy stuff.
Well, I had to write a lot of custom layout logic for that to happen. So there's that.
Nice.
At a certain point, you just end up writing custom layouts for everything, and you're like, I don't even like.
I lost
just everything
count.
is custom layouts.
I lost count how many custom layouts I have in StudioBot. I think the good majority of them are custom layouts.
There's no swing anymore. Everything is a wrapper around a wrapper.
I mean, it's still swing, but but yeah, there's Stileno saying in the chat that they've used the Decorator, well, the BasicTextField and the Decorator APIs recently, and they really liked using it. It was very well thought out. So, feedback?
Yeah, so we're keeping, so the plan right now is to keep the Decoration Box API because it is really powerful and flexible. And there's actually another cool thing you can do with it where like the decoration is it's a wrapper function. It's a composable function that gets a composable function passed in, and you have to you're supposed to call that function at some point to put the actual rendered text thing, but you don't have to. And if you don't call that, the entire text field still works. It just doesn't render any text or cursor. And that's actually pretty useful for things like custom like pin fields and stuff like that, where you actually want to have like be very opinionated about a very like constrained sort of input. So you can actually use BasicTextField and get all of the input handling, hardware events, INE events, focus, all that stuff, and just not draw the actual inner text field and draw whatever you want instead. And that is kind of like, I don't know if that was by design, but someone figured out how to do like that. That worked, and we're like, oh, that's pretty sweet actually. Ghost text field, yeah. So yeah, there's and that's like a cool example of like it's really awesome when like an API kind of empowers you to do more stuff than it was maybe designed for, just because like it's got a flexible shape. And we'd love to try to do more of that. Although again, there's so much in TextField that it's tricky. But now that I've kind of talked about like some of the problems, the way that we decided to kind of, the first thing that we wanted to fix was some of that state stuff. So we changed a few things. And again, this is like very early. We just kind of like broad strokes, kind of like changed a bunch of stuff just to get some basic feedback. And we're still iterating on this a lot. And it's very we actually did ship it as experimental in, I think, the last 1.5 alpha. We took it out for the beta. It'll be shipping as experimental again in 1.6 alphas, and it's going to be experimental for quite a while. And but it's also like more experimental than most things. So it's like it's most of the features don't work.
We need a new annotation. It's like super experimental.
Yeah, we talked about doing that. Experimental. Really don't use.
Or maybe you need like a opt-in, hold my beer or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or here be dragons.
Something YOLO text.
That yes, at YOLO. You know, we can do that, Sebastian. We can do that. We need more annotations.
I love annotations. They're amazing.
Well, yeah, we talked about doing it, and then we were like, it's probably fine. People are pretty scared of experimental already, so. But yeah, so it's actually kind of it's there. It doesn't really work very well. Like there's a whole bunch of like gestures don't work. But the API is out there if you want to play with it, and it's even on developer.android.com. If you search for BasicTextField2, everything with the new TextField is in this new text2 package, so that it's all very separate. Eventually, it'll they'll kind of try to make everything more official and make it look like the new version. But for now, everything is very separate and like that's intentional. So don't worry about the naming too much. But I can kind of show what we've been working on a little bit here.
Sure. Are you planning to deprecate the old ones when this is stable, or replace them altogether?
So I don't think deprecation is very realistic. There's tons of people using basic text field, and most of the basic use cases, the API works fine. What we would like to do is use the new code under the hood when possible, and then basically add a new overload to basic text field that has the new stuff in it. If you want to use that, and then allow people who are working on their own design systems or like their own basic text field wrappers to adopt that as they need to. But we would also, want to ship a new material text field that has the new thing as well. So that's available. So that's out there. I see a question from the chat. Why was the 2 needed? Because we wanted to. It's a big enough change that it's the second version. So it'll go. The two is just temporary. So that'll eventually go away, and it'll just be like, oh, now there's another basic text field function with this different API. But we put everything. We just wanted to like be really clear, also just for ourselves, that like, oh, this is the new one. So like, it's really clear when you're using it that this is not the usual API. And we also talked about like, should we ship this in the thing? It's like so early. It's like pre-experimental. It's like, it's really like a prototype almost more than anything. And we were like, yeah, let's ship it. Then do the work of the open. People don't have to use it, but if they want to see how this works, it's there. They can try it out. And like, this is again more experimental than most things that are experimental, but it's out there. And we actually, for the user study that we did, we actually used like a actual like release artifact for that. So we're trying to do as much of this kind of at least the code changes in the open as possible, so that it's out there and the docs are on DAC and everything. So I wonder if should I don't know, I guess like what do people in the chat want? Should I just go through the API directly, or like start writing some demo code and kind of like iterate on that? That might be
I would
better.
go with showing like usage, and then maybe like as you're using it, you can point at stuff. Oh, look at Ale shouting demo code.
Yes, that settles it.
Channeling the Aleandra spirit is perfect.
I mean,
I agree. That sounds like a better option. So I'm going to be working like directly in the AndroidX repo here, just because it's easier since we've been doing some changes. But
because I can.
Yeah, and that yes.
that sounded exactly like that in my mind. It was like, because I can.
Pretty much. I mean, it's actually once you have it set up, it's actually not too hard to work in. So it's just that activation energy. I don't know if anyone's contributed to AndroidX. So let's I'm not going to open a new file for this, but let's start with like a basic use case. So like you have you just want to like collect someone's name. So you would previously do something like this. False natives. And then you'd have, so again, I'm going to be using basic text field because we don't have the material wrappers for this yet, but you can already see one of the kind of issues where like, okay, cool, it's prompting me for value parameter because that's required, but it also opened up this lambda that I will almost never want
Yeah.
So
Just a lambda. Here you go. Here is a lambda.
yeah.
But I didn't. I mean, it's just
And the other, yeah,
free
I mean,
lambda. It's free, so just take it.
exactly. There's it's not even nullable actually. And I guess maybe if you are using basic text field directly, maybe you do want the lambda because you maybe want to add your own Chrome to it. But it's, I don't know. It's another part of the problem is that if you just leave that there, you won't actually see any text, which is really confusing because you have to actually call the function. So let's just get rid of that, and then we have to pass in the value. And we also have to pass in callback. And I made that a val, not a var. So
classic.
Okay, cool. There we are. Yes, I make that mistake every time.
Yep, same.
It's not a mistake. It's the way you do it.
Yeah, everything should be immutable, right? Like that's we're functional programmers now.
That's why there is a like a quick fix to when he says, "Oh no, you cannot write to it, but maybe you want to change it."
Wait, is there really?
Yeah, there is. On the usage side.
Oh, nice. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
You know,
they
the
thought
ID
about
guy.
that. That's why it's not an error.
I should talk to you more often, so
Yeah, whenever you want.
So this is the current API that is kind of stable. And that's
boo, boo,
stable, boring.
Boo! I'm rooting for the new API. Boo! This is how.
Yeah.
I'm trying to give you good energy about the new API. Boo! Old API. Okay.
Okay, so let's change this now and say we want to default the name to something. So I'll do Ivan. And I want to put the cursor at the. Let's say I want to start the cursor at the end of the word. So now I can't just use a string. Now I have to make this a text field value. And now I can pass in a selection parameter. So I can say selection is going to be text, which is a text range. And I'm going to say 4 to put at the end.
Okay, so you have to do the counting yourself. So there is no like dot end.
Yeah, I mean, you could do like.
No, I don't want to waste your money or your time.
I mean, yeah, you can like if this was a variable, you could call string.length, but like you have to.
Okay.
And typically it probably would be hard coded, so you could do that. But and then when you get the state update, this is now we didn't have to change this code, but this is now a text field value, so this will have the new selection, and you can put logic in here to like change the selection or the cursor position or whatever. But now it's included in there. So let's change this to the new API. So many pop-ups.
So just to be clear, so if you run this, you will have a text box and the cursor at the end, right? But it could be in the middle if you put 2 in the text range. It's just to position the cursor.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Although, yeah, again, like when you tap a text field, if you focus it by tapping on it, they'll put the cursor where you tap. So like this would be the cursor position if you focus the text field programmatically, for example, or like with tab or something. But just to kind of like show, like if you want to set the selection initially, this is kind of what you're gonna look like. So let's rewrite that with the new one. So the kind of the biggest change is that state, how we store the state. So now I can make this a val intentionally this time, and I'm not going to use by because we're no longer using mutable state. We're going to create a new type of object called TextField value, or sorry, TextField State. Or not. Okay. And we actually have a helper function here called remember TextField State that does the one thing I didn't do in here is that this would typically be like a remember savable so that it survives config changes and whatnot. So we now have this special remember function.
Please think about configuration changes for Roberto. Let's do it for Roberto.
Hashtag foldables are here.
Yeah, foldables. Hashtag foldables. Hashtag Roberto.
Yes. So now you pass that to BasicTextField2. And again, with Lambda, thank you very much. Actually, it didn't even give me a value parameter. So now I can just pass the state in. Oops, I called it name. And that's the same text field, but it works better theoretically. So we haven't set the initial selection. So right now, there's no way to do this with Remember TextField API. So this was a great example of the value of the user study. So there's two ways to you've maybe seen, if you've been doing Compose for a while, two different ways to kind of do remember state. So this is kind of similar to how you would do something like scrolling. So if you want to use modifier vertical scroll, if you want to make something of your own scrollable, you have to create this vertical scroll, or the scroll state. So you're going to create a scroll state, and you're going to say remember scroll state and pass that in over here. And the reason, and this pattern is used kind of all over the place because this isn't just call remember, calls remember savable, but because the state object is like a custom type, you have to pass in the saver type. And so that's a lot of boilerplate. So we just create these wrappers so that you don't have to worry about that. So we kind of did the same thing with TextField State. But then we were like, well, because I guess I should show the basic version of this first. So TextField State has a constructor. You can just create a TextField State and remember it like you would with anything else. Like you can also do, I think you can do this. So this, yeah, I just have to import it. So you can call this, pass in your initial value, and then like right now this isn't going to save it, so you'd have to like call remember savable and do all that stuff. But it's kind of the same idea. So you can do this, and then TextField State has some parameters. So here we can pass in our initial text and our initial selection, and make that. Someone suggested putting it at 1, so we could hit backspace and change the capitalization. So let's do that. And now it's not savable again, so we'd have to call remember savable. And then we were like, well, we could just add those parameters to remember TextField State, but then it might, because of the current API. In the current API, you're always passing in the text. We were like, if we did this, then it might be natural to try to always pass in some state here. So we were like, well, maybe we shouldn't take this in because it looks too much like the current API, but this is a totally different value because this would only be the initial text field value, and then it would be ignored, which is kind of more obvious if you put it inside of a remember lambda, because this is always used as kind of the initial value. But so we didn't have this API for the study, and we got a lot of feedback that people immediately had to drop into this one, and then they had to like call remember savable and pass the saver in, and it was just like a lot of you have to like do this, and you have to call saver is TextFieldState.saver. So like too much boilerplate, and so
escalated quickly.
Yeah. So this is really helpful though, because now we like, okay, well, we should probably just take an initial parameter in here. But we haven't made that change yet. So for now, I'm just going to use this and not do everything manually. And let's just make this more readable. So now we've created a state with some initial stuff. We also, instead of just calling selection, we also, it's more obvious now that this is the selection in characters and not code points, because there's one of the best things about working with
points.
Yeah,
don't, no, let's not. No, that's gonna take the whole rest of the stream.
Okay. Just whatever.
Yeah.
So this is charts. Okay.
Yes. So this is another, but I won't get into code points too much, but this is another one of those things where like the old API was like, you can control the selection, and the selection is just basically 2 indices. But those are always in characters. And if you have stuff that is like multiple characters long, so you can have in Unicode basically some what we think of as characters are only expressible, are not expressible with a single like Java char or char, and you need like 2 of them. It's called a surrogate pair, and so any text editing code has to always check to make sure that like it's not getting half of one of those things, because they're not valid each. When you have 2 of those, or like a surrogate pair, it's only valid as a pair. You can't just like chop off half the pair, and that's actually like an invalid encoding. So you have to always be careful and make sure like you can't put the cursor in the middle of a surrogate pair, because that is nonsense. So having that selection API meant that there was really no way to like safeguard against that, and you had to do all the logic yourself. So that's another thing that we're trying to like be a bit more careful about here. So that's why this is called initial selection in chars. But yeah, so then you create this, you pass it to the new composable, and you don't have to have, there's no callback function here. The next thing is the modifier. So there's no callback because this thing actually stores the state internally as a snapshot state or immutable state. So all you have to do is pass in this state thing, and as you type or pasting or whatever other ways there are to put in text, this will just update automatically. So that's wiring it up. A little bit, once we fix this kind of remember TextField state, it looks very similar to the old way, but it's not necessarily as obvious anymore how to get the text out of this. So with the old code, if I wanted to have like another field that like said a greeting, so I'm going to say something like that, because this is just a mutable state of in this case it's a text field value, but it could be a string, and so you have the value directly, you can just reference it directly. So it's almost that simple in the new way. But instead of just saying name, now you have to say name.text. And this is basically just a char sequence or a char sequence that is the value of the text field. The state also has things like the selection available in it, but this is all you have to do. This will automatically update when you type stuff in it, but the state is all managed internally, and then that means that the implementation of the text field can just have a single source of truth for all of the stuff, which you probably don't care about, but it makes the code cleaner and more correct and easier to change. So that's that's like the biggest change, I guess, because it's like really changing how that the state is managed. I'm gonna take a quick look at the chat here and see if there's any feedback, because can you still veto changes that way? Someone asks. That's a good question. And someone also asks if the text field state should be the one hoisted to the view model. Yeah. So one of the things that there's kind of like a bit of a double-edged sword here, I guess, because you have to use the state object. And so if you want to hoist the state up into a view model or some other kind of state holder, you have to hoist this text field state itself. So like if I wanted to define name view model, then I can do like, I can just put that in here. And now I can, pass my view model in and everything, and the state's hoisted. And you don't have to like worry about like, am I going to use a mutable state flow or a mutable state? I suspect this might be slightly controversial because a lot of people don't want to put any compose references in view model code. And you can get around that by like creating your own wrappers if you really want to. But I think we're considering like putting this in a separate artifact that is not, you know, the whole Compose Foundation module or something, or the Compose UI text, because that's a pretty big thing. And so and trying to isolate that out a little bit, so you can bring it in. But in general, I think like the Compose state system is really powerful, and there's like some cool stuff you can unlock if you use that kind of more throughout the different layers in your app. So and the old way of doing this is probably going to stick around for simple cases where you just pass in the string or whatever and get a callback. But yeah, so this is kind of where you would typically put your text field, like you'd hoist the text field state object itself, and then just pass that down to your basic text field composable. And the other question was, can you veto state changes? So that's a good question. So one of the other things that this API lets you do is add logic, whatever logic you want, to this on value change callback. Ooh, that's a lot of wrapping. There. So you can, reject spaces, or do something like, I think I can do this with a regex. And does this work? Yep. 2 regex. Nope. Okay.
I think it works if you have a string, but that's the text field value, so it wouldn't work with that.
Yeah. Name dot. Oh yeah. Right. That's what it was. A text dot. Okay. Cool. So that, yeah. And let's keep that. So if there's no space, then we'll update this. Kind of, this is just like a simple example, but you can do whatever logic you'd want here. And if you don't update it, then so there's some interesting stuff that can happen here. If you don't change the state at all, you're not going to trigger recomposition, which means that the text field composable will never actually get the new state and won't actually necessarily see that you didn't make a change. I think there's ways that works internally, but like that's this kind of one of those cases where it's like, okay, well, if the whole system relies on every time we give you an update, you pass in that update back to us. If you decide to not pass any update back to us, then it's kind of like, how do we know that told us to keep nothing? Yeah, it's like, yeah. So this is kind of a weird case, but you can also add stuff to the text or whatever you want. You can change it however you want, and if that is not what we expected on the next frame, we'll update our internal state and everything like that. So, but you can't do this now with a new API because there's no callback. So there has to be a different way of doing this sort of thing. So
spoiler, there isn't.
Yeah, that's it. Use edit text.
It's a bad sell for the new API. It's the worst sell ever.
Well, less work for us though, so we can fix more bugs.
Oh yeah, no, they are suggesting on value change too. Actually, I dig it. I'm for it.
Well, just put it back for the API v3 in like 2 years or something.
There we go. Yeah.
I mean, job security and all.
Yes, exactly. Can't make all the changes at once. So that on value change 2 might actually be a better name for this. Right now, what it's called. So we have something called filter, and there's this new type called text edit filter, which is basically just a function. And do I have to forget if I have to do this? I think I might have to do this because it's a fun interface. Right, and it takes it's complaining because it takes 2 parameters. So I think it'll autocomplete for me. Nope. So let's just look at the docs here. You can't see that. Text edit filter. It's a fun interface. Ignore this for now. The main thing is that it's a function that gets the original value as a char sequence, and it gets something else that is the text value with whatever changes were just applied. So if you hit a key, it'll be the value with that character added. Or the changes can be more complex too. Like if you're using autocomplete, it'll like replace a word. So that change comes in as another basically another char sequence. So TextField char sequence is just a char sequence with selection, but you can think of this as basically a string. You get the original value and the new value, and this function returns unit. So if you want to make changes, the new value is actually mutable, and the idea is that it kind of it's similar API to like a string builder. Mm-hmm. So you can insert, you can append. So if we go back to the demo, I'm going to get old and new, and mm-hmm. You can ignore either of those if you want to, but you can say like if do our regex thing again, and new, and because new is a char sequence, all of these kind of colony extension methods are that are available on string. Most of them are actually defined on char sequence, so you kind of get this stuff right here. So good question here about how does this mutability work? Short answer is yes, it's backed by snapshot state. Basically magic, but not. Yeah, but it's kind of an implementation detail. So basically, what we're doing is we're creating a copy of the old buffer that is mutable, and then we're saying, here, change whatever you want. This is a separate copy within this function. Make whatever changes you want. So you can do something like you can just undo the changes with this. It's weird. Right now, there's not a lot of functionality on the buffer type, so it's hard to kind of demo. But you can there's a replace call, which is kind of the core thing. So like if you want to clear it, make it empty, you could do like this. If you want to like clear the text for some reason. Yeah, but it's basically just like here's a copy of the current text contents. Change whatever you want, and then after the filter is finished, that's what it'll use to update the state. So after this, when there's a change, you type something on the keyboard, we run this filter function, and then we update the state with whatever the result of the filter was. And because all the state is internal, we can update our internal state at the same time. We can communicate. We can see if you actually made changes and communicate that to the IME as needed. So this kind of lets you do the same thing, but it's now an explicit part of the API, and it runs at a very well-defined point in the input process. And eventually, basically, we want to give this text buffer as many convenience functions as possible, like string builder, so you can make changes. There's also another thing that came out of the user study was that this is really surprising and confusing, because when you're writing this kind of function, people want to just take the new thing or take the proposed change and return a new string. So what people wanted to do is return something else instead of this, and that's kind of a natural. It's used to writing kind of functional code. Everything's immutable. You just return the new thing. So one thing that we haven't changed yet, but we want to change as kind of potentially as a result of this study is another type of filter that just lets you take in a string and return a new string. The reason that we didn't start with that was because another issue with the current text field is that it doesn't perform very well when you have really long text, because the way that it's currently built, it's doing a lot of copies of that value in different points and comparisons of different values. And strings are pretty quick to work with, but if you're copying a long string 5 times per frame just because just for fun, that kind of adds up. It adds some memory pressure and stuff like that. It's not great. So one of the things we're also trying to fix is getting out of our way so that we can do some optimizations for larger text editing. And so one of the so the reason that filter looks this way right now is because it lets us use an implementation under the hood that like doesn't actually involve copying the entire string every time. And like there's we haven't actually done this yet, but using our own types and designing the API this way means that we can kind of explore this optimization more in the future, and we're not constrained by having to return a new string copy every time, which the current API requires you to do. There's no way to get around copying stuff just because string is in the API. So like you have to use string. It's a final class. We're really like limited there. So using this mutable type lets you take a 5,000 character whatever and like make changes in a much more efficient way. If you have a short string, then maybe the copying the string is fine, and so then you want to use the simpler API. So we will probably end up providing like kind of both versions of this. But yeah, we just finished the study, so we're like still have to kind of go through this and design the next iterations. But so that's kind of how you do that, like rejecting text and stuff like that. And this is another kind of example where another thing here is that if you want to change the selection, there's also methods on this buffer that let you place the cursor in particular places. So you can say, I want to put the cursor before or after some index. And so these are all like the ones that we have right now. You can specify that index now in both characters or code points, depending on like how much work you want to do. A code point might be the more natural one, but also if you're used to working with actual strings, you might just want to work with char. So that's also an option here. But there's also like maybe you just want to always put the cursor at the end, and so now you can just call that and not have to worry about what that actual index is. And there's some other things that this can do that I will maybe get to later if we have time, because it's kind of cool, but like maybe not. It's a little bit more complex. So I want to cover some more of the high level stuff first. Let's see. So what else should we talk about? Some of the parameters are the same here. So we have like enabled read only. Oh, you can't see this pop. You can see the pop up.
Yeah, cool. We can. I don't know why, but it's good we can.
Sweet. And text style still there. Keyboard options, keyboard actions. Although right now it looks the same.
Line limits.
There we are. Line limits.
Yeah.
Line limits.
I spent a lot of time complaining about single line and all that stuff. So we were like, let's fix that too. So if you want to make something single line right now, you specify the line limits.
Okay.
As
it's a long import.
Single line.
That did a thing.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the same thing as passing single line true before, but it also handles preventing new lines and joining new lines and stuff. But if you want to have, and it'll make the scrolling horizontal and all that stuff is documented on here. Is that going to show up too?
No,
that doesn't show. But I like the fact that now it's a class, it's object, so you can't mess around too much. And now you can constrain actually the API like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. I like it. I mean, Sebastiano knows. I really like this kind of stuff. If it's hard to misuse, the better. The harder is it because I'm very error prone with this kind of stuff. So if you make it very hard for me to make an error, make a mistake, I appreciate that. So nice.
It even took me a while to figure out like single line, max min lines. I was like, I don't know what's going on here with this. It's like, why are there three? Is there some weird way they can interact? Because if there's three of them, maybe there is. I don't know. Maybe that means something. So this is very explicit. If you pass single line, it's an object. There's no way to pass. There's no min max line parameters anymore. It's impossible to misuse, basically. And
what else do you have? Because I don't think we see the pop-up for the auto completion. Do we?
Right. Probably not.
No,
so
no.
There's
so I have single line
and multi-line.
Okay. Okay, multi-line is it's a function. Okay, it's a class.
Yeah. So and this one takes 2 parameters, the min and max lines.
Okay.
And it has the normal default values, and they're called a little bit more verbosely min height in lines and max height in lines because they to indicate that they affect basically the height only, not actually the input.
Yes.
And you can I mean you can still pass a min greater than the max, but Colin doesn't let you. It's still possible to do some
Can you
weird stuff,
pass -1 as the minimum?
yeah,
QA mode engaged.
Yeah. Can you pass beer as a value? But but I think, I mean, maybe in the future, but there was something, no, or maybe I'm but I like the fact that you have explicit names.
But that
I like that. I like that very
in this
much.
case, does it mean it only caps the height, but you can still input longer text than that and it will scroll?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is how the min max lines works in the current text field.
Yeah,
too.
just checking it's the same behavior.
So this is the actual size, vertical size, the height of the.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and the reason that we have this is like it's not possible, or it's not convenient, at least, to specify this with the compose constraint system, because to know what the height of a line is, you have to know what the text style is, and then like calculate what the line height is, and like the text field is doing that all anyway. So we could theoretically make a modifier that lets you like a layout modifier that lets you specify constraints in line height for like a given text style or something like that. But that would be like you'd have to do all the extra work to measure that text, and in the text field we're measuring it anyway, so we just have this as a parameter. And it's but you have to pick one single line or multi-line. This will also do the wrapping swap.
Kind of begs the question: if you have like a annotated string as the contents and you have different styles in different rounds of text, does it change the height in lines depending on which lines are visible, or?
It shouldn't. I don't actually know what
QA mode engaged again.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't think that's what it should do, but I think the thing that we do right now is we measure and again, don't quote me on this, but the simplest thing that we could do right now is just use the text style you pass in.
Yeah.
And use that and if you have other like styles that change the font size internally, we probably would just not use that to measure. But yeah, I'm not actually sure. I'm guessing we just look at the text, the base like text style.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So yeah, so that's so we fixed that problem. And I like this better. It is a little bit less discoverable because if you're like just like, okay, I just want to like, how do I make the max lines? Like it doesn't show up in autocomplete.
Well, yeah,
it's not a parameter. So you have to read the docs a little bit. So this is one of those things where like I think naming is really important because the name helps make it really discoverable. And like what we're trying to like the tricky part about the naming here is that we're really trying to communicate a lot of concepts in a single thing. So like the like what exactly is this parameter is something that like I don't know the answer to necessarily like in a concise way, because there's like 3 things that are intimately related to each other: how new lines are rendered and input, the scrolling behavior and the wrapping behavior, and the measuring behavior, I guess. So 4 things. And like, what do you call that collection of things? So we decided to call it line limits, but there's probably a ton of answers. Like you ask 100 people, you're probably going to get like 90 different suggestions for what that should be called. So this is like one of those things where I think like the more feedback, the better. And like figuring out how to make this really discoverable is going to be like important.
Yeah, but
the range,
max, blah blah, or min, nothing show, or single. But if you search for line,
yeah, I should find it.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
And also, if you look at the quick doc on the class name, you will see probably the how it's the doc, or if you click on it, you will see the source code. The thing that I like is once you get that it's line limits, it was line limits,
Yes.
right? Everything
Yeah.
is there, right? You have everything in one place. So from a mnemonic even is getting older point of view, I just need to remember, oh yeah, how was it? Line limits, limit something, line something, and then I'm done, right? Everything is there. So
yeah, and it's all extensions or whatever. It's all in the companion object. So then it auto completes, and you see the options like so everything else. So yeah, but yeah, people have. I saw someone suggested line constraints in there. Line limits 1, yeah, just future proof it. All good ideas. So I see we're almost out of time here. And I guess so. I want to give Chica a chance to jump in if she would say anything. There's like a few more things I wanted to try to mention really quick at the end if we still have time. But
yeah, we have about 10 minutes, so you can go
okay.
on.
Will do. This time flies by. I'm always surprised how quick this goes. So there's a few other parameters we have here that are new. So we have a scroll state. So now you can pass in a scroll state, and this is just a normal. This is the same scroll state you would pass to the scroll modifiers, and this lets you hoist the scroll state of the text field out. So you can now observe when the user scrolls, or force the scroll to the end, or whatever you can do with the scroll state, you can now do. We use the scroll state internally, and if you have and that whether that scrolls horizontally or vertically is again depends on the line limits. So, but you can always only scroll in one direction. So that's what the scroll state is. I could easily do another hour. So this is something that we thought we would put in here to see how people like it. There's been a number of requests to access the scroll state and control the scroll state for TextField, and this is like fairly straightforward way to do it. It reuses existing Compose API. If you've done anything with scrolling, it's probably familiar, and it just kind of like it works really well. But there might be better ways. Like there might actually be like a more limited set of use cases for the scroll that maybe we don't need to expose the whole thing. So like this won't necessarily stay in here, but like again, kind of based on feedback and what people are doing with it, it will kind of help determine that. So there's the scroll state thing. I guess I'll just leave that in here. And some other another new parameter here is we have decoration box still. So I guess the main other thing that I want to talk about is code point transformation. So
what's the difference with filter?
Great question. So visual transformation, I mentioned, was this like function that lets you take an input text and transform it. And that is it's basically a one-way transformation. We're always applying that to the text that we're rendering in the text field. So if you have like a password field and you're replacing every character with a dot, that your callback, your state change callback, never sees the dots. It's just something that we use when we're rendering it. And then the text field, if you insert text or remove text, the text field will keep track of like the offsets and make sure that the cursor position is translated to the coordinates in the original untransformed text and all that stuff. But there's certain cases where you don't have enough information to do that correctly, and it's very hard to do accurately. So for now, we have this code point transformation function. And as we look at this, this is another fun interface. And it's a function that gets called for every code point in the source string. And if you're not familiar with code points, you can more or less just kind of think character when I say code point. So you get the index of the character in the string that it's being run on, the character itself, and then you have to return a different return the replacement here. So I'll just do this here just for illustration. This is basically the same idea. Input character, output character, and that only affects what's being rendered. That won't actually change your state. Whereas filter, this is actually going to be seen in your inside the state here. So code point transformation is kind of like a render only one way kind of mapping. But it has but it's always one-to-one. So you can replace one code point with another code point, but you can't add text or remove text. And that was something that we want to keep this as a simple option, because if that's what you want to do, it's a simple, straightforward API to do that. But another one of actually the strongest bits of feedback out of the user study that we got was one of the tasks in the user study. Basically, the way that the user study worked was we had a really simple kind of email app that we kind of built with a bunch of text spots for text input, and we asked everyone in the study to like add text fields, and each text field kind of had its own like different behavior. So like we had a login screen where you had to have a password field, and we had a sign up screen where you had to enter a phone number, and the phone number had to be like formatted in a certain way and make sure that you have the brackets and the dashes and the spaces and all that, whatever stuff you see in a phone number. And that was, I think, by far the hardest thing. When I did a dry run of the lab, that was the hardest thing to do, and the feedback from almost everybody was that was the hardest thing, because the only way to do that with this API right now is to use filter, which meant that you're changing the text every time you want to add some like template characters or something. You're always changing the actual state, and you have to handle that again on the next time you get it. And it was kind of gross. So one of the things that came out of this was like filter is a bad API for doing that kind of thing, because it really is only like render only. And so something that I would like to explore now that the study is done is like something in between visual transformation and code point transformation, with something that's like visual transformation but has more constraints on it, so that you can't do invalid things, and that doesn't require you to do the offset mapping math yourself, because that's the hardest thing to get right. So there's like, we haven't built it yet, not sure what that would look like, but there's some more things we want to add to this for sure. And then of course, like we just kind of built a very basic implementation of this at this point. Like it doesn't handle, I don't think it handles RTL. It doesn't handle a lot of gestures. So there's a lot of things that aren't working right now. But there's a lot of APIs that we still want to play with and make some changes to. Yeah, so the things that we're trying to like build APIs that are more kind of custom built for actual use cases for the current thing, that are more constrained, harder to use incorrectly, more kind of clear about like, are you using characters or code points? And we're going to be working on this for the next couple of months for sure. So any feedback is great. The last thing, since I have 2 minutes, that I really wanted to cover really quick is there's a few more methods on TextFieldState. So there's a couple of helpers here for like setting the text. So if you want to just like clear the text or something, that you can call clear text, and that basically does this like replace thing here. But since it's not in a filter, how does this actually work? Well, you can change the text programmatically by, I'm going to just write this inside of I'm going to put it in my view model here to make it a little bit
fancy boy.
Yeah. So there's an edit method you can call. So remember, we saw this text property, which is just basically a char sequence that represents the current text. It's backed by a mutable state, so you can read from it in a composition really easily. But yeah, also if you want to read it outside of composition, there's a couple of ways to do it. So the simplest way is call for each text value. This is it's actually a suspend function. So I need to like call, well, don't use run blocking, but just to make this compile. And this is kind of like it's a suspend function. It's a suspend function that takes a suspend function, and it has access to and gets the current value inside of it. So we could just call this text. And now we can do something every time the text is changed, we can observe it. Because this is also a suspend function, we can call other suspend functions. So like if you're implementing a search field and you want to debounce the text input, you can do that by just calling like delay, the coroutine's delay function. And it will just wait for a second, and then it'll do something with it. And this kind of behaves like collect latest. And actually, it uses collect latest under the hood, if you're familiar with Flow. So if the new text change comes in while it's suspended here, it'll cancel it and then call it with the new value. If you do prefer Flow, there's also text as flow. And now you get a at the type here, and now you've just basically got a flow of char sequences. And you can do whatever you want with that. So you can, use your own debounce and your own collect, and
That's nice.
do whatever other operations. You can like filter, and you can do whatever you want. And so you can observe the text changes using just a basic suspend function. You can use flow for it, and anything else that reads snapshots, you can do this too. So under the hood, actually, both of these use snapshot flow. So you can also just do, if you are comfortable with snapshot flow, you can also do that. And then this is basically just the same thing. Actually, main.textAsFlow literally just calls snapshot flow under the hood. So,
fair enough.
yeah, so there's this edit function. Oh yeah, that's the other thing I was going to mention. So that's observing the changes. There's this edit function. This is kind of similar to filter. It gets a mutable text field buffer with the current text value. So for example, like that clear text function, it deletes all of the text, and then it puts the cursor at the end. So you can, because it's a mutable, you get this buffer, you can replace stuff. You can mutate it in place. And again, this is going to be a copy of the current thing. So it's fine to mutate it within this function. We copy the text value and then let you make changes to it. And then when edit returns, we update the state with whatever the value was. This is, if you call this normally in the global snapshot, it'll apply right away. If you call this inside of a nested snapshot, you won't actually see the changes until all of the snapshots are applied up to the global snapshot. Yeah, so this is kind of like the low-level edit changing API to actually make changes, and then we have some like convenience functions on top of that, so you can like set the text to something else. Question from the chat: is this the equivalent of doing a snapshot flow? State the thing we had in BasicTextField. Not really, because if you do something like for each text value, and then you try to do like main.edit, this won't work, and it'll do weird stuff, and we're going to try to prevent this from happening, because it's just then you're back into kind of the same problems as you had with the old one, but even worse because there's even more asynchrony in here now. And there's another question: is text as flow needed as an API? Technically not. There's nothing that you, even like for each text value, is just calling text as flow collect latest. The only reason that we have these here is because they're slightly more discoverable, and we don't want to like kind of the level like snapshot flow is a little bit of a lower level state API, and we don't want if you're just learning like UI programming for the first time, we don't want you to have to like know about snapshot flow. So then you can just call for each text value. Or if you're familiar with flow, you're gonna like, is there like a flow thing? If you type flow, again, you can't see the autocomplete here, but if you just type name.flow, this text as flow thing will pop up. So they're really just there for discoverability.
There's another question from earlier from Atul GPT. Won't this make the workflow async? Do we need to show loader to the user for better UX?
It doesn't. It removes it makes things more synchronous. So if you want to do something like show, but I guess there's like a couple of ways to interpret that question. So I'm not 100% sure
I
what you're asking.
suspect what they mean is that now that you're using a flow, you might have delays, or it might take some X amount of time to do an edit or something. So maybe in that case, that's what I make of the question.
Yeah. So if you want to make changes based on the text that was input, then you're using filter, and this is synchronous. So that'll happen within the same, like, right away as we're processing the text changes. If you want to do something else based on the text state, then you'll get the update in time for the next frame, because when we get the event, if that comes through I think that's basically, if you like, if you want to make changes based on the text state, use filter. If you want to change other stuff, like kick off other work based on that, then you can observe the text thing. So those are, like, we basically split that into two separate. Those are two different things you're trying to do with it. If you're trying to change the text itself and you need that feedback loop, then we have a synchronous filter function that you can use. Otherwise, you observe the state like you would with anything else, and using the same API as you would for anything else. I don't know if that really answers your question, but like, if you want to do something like, but this API makes it really easy to do something like, if you're writing like a search field, for example, you can say, like I said before, you can just do your debouncing in here, and call your, let's say you have like some search, and you take a string for your search query. This is kind of one of the samples that we did, but now you can just call, like, input your search results in a mutable state, or a state list. There. I don't know, I'll make the results a string. So now you can just say, like, results is, well, actually, I just put a mutable state of the list. This returns a list of results. Now you can just say search. Why is this complaining? Because this is a I didn't do by. Okay, so you can do something like this, and this will work like as expected. But if you're trying to do, like, actual change the text based on the input, then you need to use filter. Yeah, so validation and stuff is, like, that's something that filter function should do. The other, like, the snapshot and flow and coroutine observing things are for doing other kind of, like, side effects based on the results of the text. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers the question. But yeah, I think we're kind of out of time. And I see some suggestions in here: property bounce, markdown. Yeah, text styling. That's one thing that we didn't implement for the study, was like adding styles. So, like, right now, text field value supports annotated string, but the actual text field ignores that and just always clears the styles on every time you type something. So, and it's kind of like, it was a to-do. So it's there in the API, but it's not wired up at all. So that's something that we want to add here as well. Well, we haven't done it yet, but it's definitely on the list. And having, like, more control over the state API means that we can, it's going to be, like, easier to implement that in a good way, where, you know, we have make sure that, like, if you type something inside of an annotation, we adjust the annotation to include the new string, and we can be more careful about that kind of stuff. There's also an API in here. I didn't get to it, and I won't talk about it very much, but there's actually, you can actually get the list of changes. So this is basically like a list of mappings of, like, indices in the old string to indices in the new one. So if you type something, it'll be like character 5 in the old string is now 5 6, and that's like the new text that or if you delete it, it'll go like from 5 6 to 5 5. It's just a list of ranges basically, so you can actually like look at what was inserted, where it was inserted, and have logic based on that, or do stuff like that. So there's kind of more depth to this API as well. So anyway, yeah, that's. I wanted to go into that more, but I see we're out of time here. So there's lots here, though. Yeah.
You can also crash Sean's text stream in 2 weeks if you want.
Oh, there you go.
Because we have more text in 2 weeks. Yay!
Just a wall of text.
I mean, there's so many things that you folks are working on that is like super interesting. But yeah, spoilers. We're gonna have another text stream in 2 weeks, and Sean is gonna talk about performance because he's done a lot of work on that recently, and that's also very, very interesting.
Yeah, that'll be good. He's done incredible work, and it'll be a fascinating stream for sure.
Okay, so we are a bit over time, so let's wrap this up. Before we go, Chica wanted to let you folks know that the user studies that we've been mentioning, they are still ongoing. There's still more to come. And if you're interested in taking part in one of them, there's a link that I'm going to put in the chat right now that you can go to and sign up for it. You will from every now and then get an email saying, hey, there's a user study. Are you interested? Obviously, always say yes to the text ones. Because I mean, at this point, if you're looking at this stream, you're probably interested in them. But yeah, just go there, fill in the form, and then the user research team will get in touch for formal proper user testing. The great thing about them is that you get to help shape the future of the APIs that you and everyone else will end up using. So that is very cool. In general, there's different kinds of user studies. Some are diary studies where you have a task to do, or you have to essentially fill in a diary every day for a number of days. Other times you have studies where you have a task to complete, and then you have to provide feedback on them. Other times it's just like a video call where you're asked about things. So that's kind of, and I think I've covered Stylianos' question in the chat now with that. But those are the main kinds. There might be different ones. You will, before becoming a Googler, I've participated in many user studies. I love user studies. They're super fun for me, so that's why I was doing it. And unfortunately, cannot do it anymore. But I can still, I can still tell people to do them because this is really cool. Okay, so I think this is a wrap. Ivan, do you want to do the Ivan wrap up?
Yes, the Ivan wrap up is always about the being grateful about the support, and I want to thank you for staying with us. If you're watching this on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. It's important. We reached 2,500 subscribers on YouTube. I mean, it's just a couple of Italians messing around. That's not bad.
With smarter
not bad.
People.
Yeah, that's actually the clever thing. But thank you. If you're watching this on Twitch, you can also rewatch it as a VOD if you have a subscription. You can have a subscription for free if you have Amazon Prime, and you can subscribe to our channel every month. If you like the t-shirt, please check the merch store. And we also have metal pins. We also have the keychain, stickers, a lot of stuff. Try also the coffee page where you can get a subscription. And thank you, Carmen, for subscribing.
Thank you.
And you have a message on Twitch because you won the book. So I need your email.
Already replied.
So, fair enough. And yeah, so if you join our Bruschetta tier, you also can join the Discord channel and the private chat that we have usually at the end of the stream, where Sebastiano creates the clickbait thumbnails for YouTube. And most of the time you can chat with us and the guest. So just give it a shot. Thank you, Zach, and thank you to the behind the scene help and studies. And yeah, Sebastiano, what else?
Who do we
Oh,
have next week? Yeah, sure. Go for it.
One closing thing I wanted to say, if you have feedback about this or more questions or anything, I'm on Colton Slack and a couple other Android Discords and Slacks and stuff like that. And I'm also on Mastodon.
Yeah, it's
Zach
just
Clip
right here, right now. You
you
can
got it?
see. Yeah, it's in the.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
there it is.
there.
Nice. So yeah, let me get any questions, any feedback. Let us know. If you do want to try this out, again, it's super experimental. This basic TextField2, not production ready, but like play with it if you want. Like see if you have if you're doing some like super interesting text input stuff, see how it feels and let us know. We'd love to know. And stay tuned for more information. I'll be giving a talk about this work at DroidCon SF next month, and we'll be talking more about it throughout the year. So yeah, stay tuned and yeah, I hope it's fun for everybody.
It was very good having you back, and I'm looking forward to yet another text stream at some
Always
point.
a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I think with Sean, we've had almost everyone. I still need to get a few, but not too many left from the team. Okay, so we'll see you all next week. Next week we have our friend Daniele that is gonna be with us, and we're gonna be talking about libgdx. So you can learn how to make a 2D game in Java or Kotlin. In fact, he's been working for a long time on a libgdx game that is called, I think, Poker Wilds or something like that. I hope he's going to be covering that because it's super interesting. And then, yeah, the week after, I've said it already, we're going to have Sean, and we're going to be talking about text performance and how much it's improved recently. So with that, we're done. Thank you very much. For people in the Bruschetta tier, I'm going to be putting the link to the backstage in a couple of seconds. And then off we go. Thank you again. Bye.